welcome to our show, Intellectual Property. You may have heard all about it, but do you really understand what it is? Well, we're going to make sure you do understand all the ramifications of it because we have a specialist in intellectual property, Roger Outen, CEO and principal of Outen IP. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Julian.
And good to see you. First of all, let's define it. What is intellectual property?
Sure. Well, intellectual property is essentially a creation of the mind. And so any type of idea, invention, creation, anything that you're able to create and then reduce to an actual external form, because obviously anything that's in the head stays in the head, but anything that you're able to reproduce and have it take a substantive form, that is fixed in date and time, then that becomes intellectual property. And so it's a matter of just being able to protect that idea that is of utmost importance if you want to be in a position to commercialize it.
So anyone in business of any kind really could be affected by this. This is not just for big corporations.
Intellectual property affects all aspects of business,
Right,
industry, all industries, not just business, all industries.
Because it deals with copyright.
It deals with copyright, it deals with trademarks, it deals with design rights, it deals with patents, it deals with trade dress, it deals with trade secrets, it deals with traditional knowledge. I mean, there's all these different aspects of IP that affects.
Under the current circumstance, who is entitled to the trademark, for example? Say if I have a show on a different station, it has my name, but the company says it's their show. How do you go about determining who really has the right?
Well, at the end of the day, a lot of that is going to be defined based on, in your particular case, in your employment agreement, right? Very often, by virtue of you being employed and in that space, your rights would basically be assigned to the employer. But there's always the devil's in the details, and so like I say, it really would depend. For instance, I know there's some researchers that I've worked with that are very inclined to reserve certain aspects of their work for their own personal interests, and so that would be specific to an employment agreement. But generally speaking, and this is very generally speaking, when you're employed, any works that's produced would be under some sort of work for hire construct. And so essentially, the IP that's generated by virtue of your employment would accrue to your employer.
Great, let's talk a little bit about the legal framework now as it exists. Let's get that out of the way. What governs us right now in 2024?
Well, in 2024, we are definitely working on some new constructs because the pace of industry, the pace of trade, all the different international agreements has really changed the international landscape, our trade landscape. And so we're in a very progressive state right now. The government has proposed, I think it's 14, 15 different new amendments and new proposals to the existing IP legislation. And so that tells you just how much has to be updated and modified to get to this point. But currently, we are operating under some very archaic and aged and outdated legislation.
How old? How dated?
Well, there is the 1906 Trademark Act.
Well, I'm sure that's really valid today. But it is unfair to actual practitioners today, obviously.
It can be, because essentially that act only protects goods. It doesn't address services. And we know our markets have basically generated from, well, I shouldn't say basically, but it has evolved from a trade-only construct to that of services. We know, obviously, one of our main industry is tourism.
Right. So it has always been. So really, we should have been way ahead of the curve on this one.
Exactly. Even financial services, you're still back to services.
Exactly.
So in terms of those larger sectors that need to be properly protected, I'm keen to say the government is actually working on it. But in terms of the actual legislation, it hasn't kept up. It hasn't kept pace.
Now, we know that during the pandemic, people found out that they had skills they didn't know they had, or they sort of perfected those skills, and they're all service-based, whether it be face-to-face or online. And the government is giving a sort of push towards the orange economy, particularly for younger artists. Are you finding that more of them are coming to you for advice now?
They are, and I think it's very encouraging at this stage because I've always been of the view that Bahamians are very talented people. Literally, sometimes I'm amazed by some of the artists, the graphic artists, the songwriters, the dancers, the playwrights. It's amazing to see what they're actually able to put together, and very often on very limited resources. And so they are definitely looking to fine-tune their niche. And I know that obviously the government is working on different programs to even further foster their levels of innovation. But when it comes to the individual creative, yes, they're definitely inquiring of services and looking, and I think that's important. I really think that's important. If you're just starting out, that's the right place to start in terms of how do I protect this? That's a thought process they definitely need to consider.
Because really, if you create it, you should be able to get paid for it.
Benefit.
And not just throw away your money, really, to some other entity, eh?
Exactly, exactly. And it's one of these things where I will always encourage young people, if you're planning your business plan, IP, the protection of your intellectual property, should be crucial to that business plan.
You may recall some years ago, and I thought it was hilarious, but it really isn't, that they were trying to say, I think that Japan was trying to sort of kidnap Junkanoo, the idea of Junkanoo as something Japanese. Now, I don't know how that could be. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with it, but it would not surprise me.
Yeah, so in situations like that, that's where you have to go to an international body for,
Yes.
like the World Intellectual Property Organization?
Exactly, exactly. And I know recently in the news there was the move towards UNESCO in terms of having that protection. So I think, like I say, in many ways we're making those progressive strides to actually finally address this. It's long overdue. I'll be the first to say it's long overdue. But we are making those progressive strides to go ahead and implement the right protectives.
Now, your business is not just local, it's also international.
Yes.
What percentage, if you care to tell us, is what?
Well, I'll save that one, but I will say this.
A growing Bahamian percentage.
Exactly, a growing Bahamian percentage. And it is one of these things where, all of this starts with awareness. And so, this is obviously why just being able to come and sit with you and talk about IP matters is very important. For whatever reason, people seem to shy away from being able to address that with legal practitioners, but it's very important. At the end of the day, it's the soul of your business.
Do you think they think it's complicated, or?
They think it's complicated. They may think it's even too expensive, but it's one of these things where at the end of the day, if you can make a budget and plan for everything else that's you're a part of your business, IP is a very important part of your business. And unfortunately, it's not until you have acts of infringement or, just different infringing acts against your good, your product, or service that you realize just how important that is.
Great. Well, we're talking about legislation in progress, let's say, or in process. But what else is needed to build up the industry?
I think there needs to be greater awareness at the very.
So there's a room for communication specialists in IP.
I would think so. I would think so. Absolutely. They definitely need to be more aware. Excuse me, of what can be done, what should be done, when it should be done. I mean, all of that it really does boil down to the expertise of your advisor. But ultimately, in terms of just getting the word out, it's very important to raise awareness of IP-related matters.
What else needs to be done? We're going to get to something special that you're doing in a minute.
I think there needs to be technical training, even if it's not even technical training, training for the average business person. Maybe I'll just walk that back a little bit. Training for the average business person so that they're better able to understand how it actually affects them.
Now, you're having a very special event coming up on April 26th.
Yes.
This is timely that we have you here.
Yes, it is. Thank you for thinking of me.
Yeah, well, you've been on a previous show with me before, and I was inspired by you. Tell us a little bit more about this event. It's a week-long event?
Sure. No, I wish. It's actually 2 days.
2 days.
It's just so you, to set the background, World IP Day is actually on April 26th every year. And it is the one day that I definitely set aside to raise awareness when it comes to just educating the public in terms of the need for intellectual property, how it affects how we work, live, and play. And essentially, how we're able to benefit from the constructs. Now, on the 27th, that's a continuance of the actual conference, but it's a little bit more of a laid-back atmosphere in terms of there being more roundtable discussions and all of that. Now, on the Friday, there would be a series of sessions and training seminars that the public is welcome to attend, and it's open for their engagement.
Now, if people want to find out more, I know you're online.
Sure.
What is the website they should tap
Sure,
into?
it is www.worldipday242bahamas.com.
Great. Now, you have some exciting speakers.
I do.
Tell us, and I noticed that they're going through, it's amazing how you're bringing everything together. I like the fact that you're focusing on the SDGs, the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, including environmental issues, and tell us how all of this comes together.
Sure. Well, this year's theme was actually chosen by WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization. So I had no creative license on that. But it is IP and the SDGs, building our common future through innovation and creativity. And so really it is with that backdrop in terms of being able to link the importance of IP and the Sustainable Development Goals. It's in that backdrop that we'll be talking about how do we achieve goals such as decent work and economic growth, that's SDG 8, or how do we achieve goals such as quality education, that's SDG 4. So you have these lofty goals that were set by the Paris Agreement, I think it's in 2015, when a lot of the countries had signed on to really improve the life of humans on a global scale by 2030.
Right.
Obviously, we're a developing island nation. We have our own issues and limitations, but we can still strive to at least improve, if not meet all the prescribed, we can strive to get there.
And in some of them we're doing quite well.
And some, I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree. In some of them we are doing quite well. And so what we decided to do, and this is exactly to your point, some of them we're doing quite well. There are 17 in total that have been prescribed, or mandated, I should say. This year's conference focuses on 8 that I believe we're doing well. We obviously, and this is a very humble opinion, but just in terms of an IP practitioner, me being able to relate the goals to intellectual property, I've identified 8, and we're going to focus on 8. And so there's going to be a series of speaker-led discussions, roundtables, training sessions, really for all attendees to come and benefit.
And you have a lot of international participants as well.
We have some. We have some very, and we tried to keep it within the region. And the reason I say that is because what happens is it's very easy for someone in Belgium or in the Netherlands or any other part to have a very impactful discussion on IP. However, how does that really impact us in the region, the different limitations that we have? So we obviously have speakers from Barbados, we have speakers from Antigua, we have speakers from all range. They're not just IP practitioners, they're also academics. We have some speakers from the University of West Indies. We have some local speakers as well, obviously. We're honored to have our keynote speaker, Minister Michael Halkitis, attend and give the keynote address as it relates to SDG 8, decent work and economic growth.
Great. So this is really specific to the region's needs,
Yes.
Bahamas and the region's needs.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
That is really good.
Yes.
So after these 2 days now, anyone who goes there is going to come up with a lot of knowledge.
That's the goal. That's the goal. And what's nice about
And
the
a
way...
new perspective, I guess.
And a new perspective. And what's nice about this is obviously tailor-made sessions. So for instance, you know, if your particular interest is that of education, the sessions are designed so that you can pick your own track so that every attendee has their unique experience of the conference. There's obviously a lot of information, there's a lot of speakers, there's a lot of roundtables to participate in, but it's one of these things where if your only goal is, let's just say you're a farmer, if your only goal is learning more about farming and agriculture, then you can still pick and choose your sessions so that everything relates to your particular industry and your focus of knowledge.
Oh, that's great. I want to take you back a little bit just to focus on, I brought this thing up about John Canoe. We acknowledge that UNESCO is acknowledging us.
Sure.
Having that done translates into real money for the Bahamas, using John Canoe as its intellectual property.
We know the importance of being able to protect, and there's so many rights that's related with John Canoe. I mean, that alone could be have its own conference, to be completely honest with you. But it's important for people, I mean, the average John Canoer, to know the importance of IP in a parade. Just literally knowing what you can benefit from, how you can commercialize your trade, your craft, how the different groups, and that's another thing. We are fortunate this year to actually have a practitioner out of Trinidad who is quite familiar with the Trinidad Carnival and quite familiar with that construct. She will be having a roundtable and a specific session to the John Canoers, and so we invite everyone to come and attend and participate in her discussion. It's definitely worth it.
Trinidad has really taken their carnival concept to the world. They really, you know, it's amazing. I mean, through Miss Universe and through all kinds of international
and it's important, you know, at the end of the day, it's really important for people to be able to make that geographical connection with this body of art. It should not be that, while John Canoe should be for an international experience, it should not be that everyone can deliver the importance, the impact of a John Canoe experience. That's truly Bahamian, and so we have to do our best to protect it at every level.
Let me ask you what else is going on, as far as you're concerned, for the future of IP.
Sure.
I don't know why it comes in my head, but an IP institute. Are there any plans for something like that? I mean, or just...
That answer may be above my pay grade, but am I in favor of it? Absolutely, absolutely. Because these things we need to be in a position where we can benefit. You know, there's so many sub-levels to IP. We need to be in a position where we can fully commercialize it as Bahamians. If there's one thing that I've said as in my years of practice is that Bahamians are very talented people. That's not even up for debate. And whenever we're given the opportunity to participate at the world-class level, we excel. So essentially, if we should not be able to focus on that level of progress only when you hit the international mark. Let's focus on what we can do here and really work with Bahamians and get them in a position where they can actually thrive, grow, and better their lives.
To me, it sounds like this should be a course, even if it's not a mandatory course for graduation, but at least it should be a course that you should take in your final year of high school, preparing you for the real world.
It's very important. I mean, essentially what it's doing is, and this, you know, this is a broader construct, but what it does is it teaches young people to think how to problem solve, how to create, how to work within confined limitations. I mean, very often, sometimes people are working with limitations, be it economic, be it you know, any type of resources that's restricted. So it forces you to be creative. Now, what you choose to do with it thereafter, I'm of the view it should be protected.
Now, if someone needed your advice, how can they find you?
They can find me, feel free to reach me at Outen IP. They can send an email to info@outenip.com. We'd be happy to schedule any type of consultation that you require. Feel free to just drop 3 lines as to the nature of the inquiry, and you can reach me there.
That's great. What else would you like to add at this point of our discussion here?
You know, at this point, I just basically want to say with respect to this conference that's coming up, it's very important for everyone to get involved. It really is important to learn how to essentially commercialize your respective trades. IP touches everyone, from the farmer to the fisherman
The poet? The poet?
to the poet, to the, you know, the playwright, to the junkaneur, to women in business, to, well, anyone in business.
But you just hit on something. How many, well, first of all, how many participants do you expect? And how deep is the interest from women?
Sure. Well, the numbers are growing. The numbers are growing. We're looking at about 300, and we're hoping to have that increased. When it comes to women, women are very much on board because they realize that it's very important. It's an economic equalizer as far as I'm concerned, IP. It really allows to level the playing field where other areas of gender or inequalities may weigh against them. So I'm very excited to have so many female business owners who have engaged, or even sole practitioners who have engaged in their own activities, focused and wanting to learn about IP.
Let's talk a little bit about overlapping, because I see, and you can correct me, between WIPO, WTO, and arbitration matters, a big connection, right? And we know that arbitration is being talked a lot about. We're even hearing the Prime Minister talk about it recently. So some of these things, you're gonna get a little bit of understanding about how they work together?
Well, definitely with respect to WIPO and WTO, because when you get into arbitration, it becomes a bit specific to the actual, the context. So from that perspective, the only connection that I would make as a general statement is that sometimes when you have higher level IP issues, parties may agree to move to arbitration to have any disputes settled therein. And so from that perspective, that may be the involvement of arbitration. But when it talks about WIPO and WTO, what basically we're saying is that all of these initiatives, all of these treaties, all of these mandates are really geared towards globalizing the way we live, work, and play. And so even within that global construct is the need for parties to play at certain levels. And so essentially with WTO focusing in on trade, right, we want to obviously be in a position where we are supporting the intellectual property that would be governed by WIPO, having our trade, our intellectual property protected in trade.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question that I really should know the answer to, but I don't at this moment. Obviously, we've stalled on full membership into WTO. Where are we as far as WIPO membership is concerned?
Well, I think we're definitely there. The one thing about that is we're not as confined in certain aspects, and so in terms of being able to follow WIPO, we're definitely we're always going to be faster to accede to something like that, and so we have, yes.
Well, our time is up, sadly, but I want to give you 30 seconds to say anything else about your wonderful event that's coming up. And this is not the first one, is it?
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's our second. And really, we welcome all Bahamians to come out and experience our World IP Day 2024 under the theme IP and the SDGs, building our common future through innovation and creativity. And so if you are a creative, if you are interested in entering the orange economy, if you have any type of interest in agriculture, in farming, in any type of business endeavor, that you're thinking, you know something, I would like to know how I can benefit or how I can better protect my IP, please come out. It's going to be held at the British Colonial Hotel on April 26th and April 27th. And so we welcome you, and I'll look for you.
Well, Roger, it's always wonderful to see you, and I'm sure that you're going to have a very successful conference. And let's ensure that all Bahamians understand how important IP really is.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Great. Now, after the break, a story about Bahamian goodness. Stay with us.